Hello and welcome back to Reactivity TV. I'm Amy Albero and I'm a licensed therapist.
I am Chris, and I'm not a licensed therapist, but what I am is highly emotional this week, much like Jen, you might say. You know, I am relieved that this season has finally come to a close. I am disappointed that Jen turned out to be the Bachelorette that we feared that she would become. I'm confused by a lot of the responses from the live crowd, as well as some of the online dialogue related to Devin being a liar. I am, actually quite annoyed that production made us sit through a 3-hour season finale. That was unnecessary. I'm actually particularly sad for all of the single women out there because this show did not raise or perpetuate a narrative that's going to help their dating prospects. In fact, it did the opposite, and I'm quite sad for the single women out there. But I am also happy about something. I'm happy that they did the breakup this episode so that they spared us having to do an emergency recording next week. But most importantly, do you know what I'm feeling?
What are you feeling?
Vindication. Was there anything that we predicted this, specifically me, of course, was there anything that I predicted this season that didn't come to pass? She does not end up with the guy. I think she ended up being the Bachelorette that we were hoping that she would not be. It was a season where there wasn't a lot of surprises, and that was disappointing because what we expected was a pretty low bar, and we have come to the conclusion. And I think our prediction that somebody in production hates Jen is clearly true. This was a bad episode for her again. After a bad episode last week, there's been like 3 solid opportunities where production has just set her up where you're just like, somebody does not love you in that editing room. Just not a great season finale, not a great season, not a great Bachelorette, and not a great live audience. Where you at?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. I have a lot of questions about what you shared. And we're going to get into it all. I will share my thoughts, my overall thoughts. But before I do, and before we get into the episode and what you all can expect from us this episode, please hit that like button at the bottom of this video and hit that subscribe button as well if you haven't done so already. I see you all hitting that subscribe. Our subscribers are climbing. I really, really appreciate it. We both do. But if you are watching and you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. It's just a little tap, and it actually goes a really long way for us. We really appreciate it, and we love having you here.
And please also hit that bell icon so that you're alerted anytime we post new content to the channel. So, opening thoughts. Give us your opening thoughts on the episode, just in general.
Well, it was long.
Way too long.
But there were some highlights. I really appreciated getting to spend some time with Jen's family, particularly her brother. I think things that I really want us to talk about today, we're not going to go through item by item like we typically would. Things that I do want to talk about is specifically Marcus and what was going on for Marcus. And I know you had some things that you wanted to talk about there. These are curiosities I have. You're asking me my thoughts. I'm things I'm curious about, things that I want to try to understand more. Marcus and his reaction. I want to understand Jen and her motivations. I want to understand Jen and her reaction. And I want to understand Devin and the role that he played in the breakup, as well as their dialogue on the couch. So, I know you're pulling from my thoughts. I think, but
your thoughts are you have questions. You left the episode, it sounds like, with a lot of questions and not a lot of answers.
I left truly with confusion as a viewer. As a therapist, I'm I want to my confusion means that there's an opportunity for me to try to dig in a little bit more, understand a little bit more. Clearly, we didn't get the whole picture. What am I missing? So I have a thirst for desperately trying to understand what it is happened here. The other thing that I'm feeling as I'm watching this, and I alluded to this last week, is a heightened sense of relatability to Jen in my younger days and being a late adolescent, early adult, and the way that I navigated relationships and the way that I see so many young people, young women navigate relationships, young men too. I'll obviously we'll talk about Marcus and Devin quite a bit, but I was finding myself like having a lot of empathy for Jen and just seeing the way that she was handling this and feeling grateful that I've matured beyond that, but was holding a lot of empathy for her, I'd say.
It's interesting that you come away with so much confusion because I feel like this is one of the easiest episodes to peg. I feel like I could tell you exactly what Marcus's motivation was. I could tell you exactly how they Jen and Devin broke up. I could, with high levels of confidence, and I feel like I fully understand what was going on in Jen's head.
Do you think that's like because you have like obviously a closer understanding of like the male mind and
yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I have no questions in my mind what Marcus was doing. And I plan on talking about that in a few minutes. I feel that I strongly understand, having seen, now this is my 5th season of this franchise, I have a strong understanding of probably what happened between Devin and Jen. And you could see glimmers of it. And Devin was just not willing to pull the trigger in saying it because he's playing the game and he's doing what he's supposed to do in this franchise, which is unfortunately a bit of a lie. But it is what it is. So yeah, before we get into all that, my opening thoughts are it was way too long. It was a very boring episode. We did not need 3 hours. Yeah. It was just boring. And they kept trying to like rein us in, like, oh yeah, no, we got this great thing happening. This never before seen thing is going to happen. And they bring out Jonathan and Jeremy and all these people to try and like hype us up. But the problem was we predicted this like in episode 3 that she was going to propose to whoever it was. And the whole thing that ended up happening, we predicted this 5-6 episodes ago. So it wasn't climactic at all. We've all been predicting that she's not going to end up with the guy. So like you couldn't hype this up, right? And the personalities you got on the couch, every one of them from Marcus to whoever, like they were not going to be the men tell all exciting, whatever. It just wasn't going to happen because these guys were all really concerned about just playing their part and doing their image and just, tucking their tail between their legs. None of this was honest. Nothing Jen did tonight was honest. Like the whole episode, I banged on the episode last week for being overly scripted and contrived. Nothing about this episode was honest. Nobody was being honest. And it was really frustrating to watch that you took up 3 hours of my time to show me complete and utter is what it felt like. And that's what I really was frustrated about. But we can get into it. But so let's go on to happier thoughts. We got one date. So let's do good date, bad date, shall we?
Sure. For old time's sake.
Last one of the season. And unfortunately, it was not the first one of these. Another cultural date.
Yeah, they love giving Devin the cultural dates.
Yeah,
I wonder what that's about.
I wonder how much of it is just happenstance, like luck of the draw, and how much of it is planned that way. But we like these types of cultural dates, especially at this stage of the relationship. Not a great first date, but it's a cute little thing. I think it's a good date, not a great date, but it's a good date for this stage of the relationship. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree. They're still in beautiful Hawaii, and Hawaii does have its own culture that I think is really important to celebrate. In addition to just soaking up the sun on the beach, and so I like that they are appreciating the culture. So I thought it was a good date. No real complaints. Just again, a curiosity around this is Devin's 3rd cultural date.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into the events of the episode. We're not going to do minutia on every single one of them, but we do get the Jen's family introduction to Devin. I mean, to me, it just seemed like Devin doing Devin, crushing it as best he can. I think the notable takeaways here are that Jen's mother, not into this process at all.
Yeah.
Going through the motions, supporting her daughter, but not into this. And her brother, James, all-star of the episode.
Yeah.
What a
MVP.
fantastic guy.
Yeah.
Right. But I thought Devin just doing Devin, knocking it out of the park. Not much more to say. What about you?
So Devin doing Devin. We've been saying that all season. Do you have a different taste in your mouth in saying that, knowing what we know now?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Because I think Devin is almost certainly getting an unfair look in all of this. And I'll explain why later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just curious if again, knowing what you know now, if you view it differently.
The problem is we don't know anything.
Yeah.
And this is the big important thing, is this entire episode was Jen getting to tell her side of the story. She cut him off every time he opened up a word. He wasn't going to badmouth her. He came in basically saying, I'm just going to capitulate on everything. You know, we never got his side of the story. Why did he fall out of love? Why did he pull away? You know, do you think that just happened? Is it just that Devin's a bag who just happened to like decide that he didn't love her anymore? Or was there another side of the story, right? There's always two sides of the story. Your side, my side, and the truth.
Sure. Right? Yeah. And listen, when we get to that part, I will give my most empathetic and reasonable idea of what probably happened. I don't think, not to bury the lead, I don't think Devin is some maniacal monster that plotted and planned this from the beginning, as is being suggested. And so like that's kind of what I wanted to clarify when you're saying Devin doing Devin. When we've said that, do you think there's any gamesmanship within Devin doing Devin, or are you just is Devin doing Devin just being what describe that?
When I say Devin doing Devin, what I really mean is he came in confident, energetic, honest, and genuine. And you can never say that at any point in time, he was never, you know, he never appeared not to be genuine. He never appeared not to be there for the wrong reasons. He never appeared, or he never appeared to be there for the wrong reasons. He never, appeared to be kind of putting himself first, or his career, or the clout, or doing any sort of clout chasing. He played the game extremely well, but he also played it extremely believably. Which leads me to believe that he actually probably was pretty genuine. It's very easy, as you pointed out in past podcasts, it's very easy when you are locked in a house for 8-10 weeks and no phone, no nothing. All you have to do is to sit down and think about this person for you to get caught up in a little bit of a Stockholm syndrome type situation, right? I mean, that's what it is, right? You are being put into a highly stressful situation and told that your entire life is supposed to revolve around this one person. And you have no outside media, you have no phones, no anything like that to kill time. Like, yeah, I do believe that Devin was genuine, and he just happened to have a skill set that made him well suited to this type of competition. That doesn't mean he was maniacal, doesn't mean he was fake, doesn't mean that he wasn't being genuine. It just means that, you know, he was well suited to this kind of game, and he did really well in it. But eventually the real world comes. And this is what we just saw. You had just got done watching the UK version of Love is Blind, season 1, right? And I was in and out while you were watching that. But during their reunion, one of the couples was saying, yeah, you know what? Like, it was great when people were exactly what I say all the time. It's great. People are setting the dates up for us. They're paying for everything. There's no, like this, it's literally just you and me, and everything else is blocked out. And then the real world comes, and suddenly you got to pay bills. Suddenly it's $1,000 to hop on a plane and get a hotel room or whatever, someplace. Like, stuff suddenly happens, and things get in the way, and life happens. And it's in a show like this, in 8 weeks, you do not build up that foundation, right? I say all the time, you can't actually fall in love in a show like this, because to fall in love means you have taken the actions of sacrifice for another person, and you are not in a position to sacrifice in a show like this. Everything is being handed to you, right? And so, yeah, I think that at the end of the day, the Devin doing Devin is a compliment in my eyes, and not in some way a suggestion that he was, gaming it out and being inauthentic. I think he was gaming it out, but also being quite authentic at the same time.
Yeah, I think that Devin has, as you said, good skills, and he used his skills really well. And whether that's his skills to articulate himself, his skills to connect with people, he knew how to present himself in a way where he could be seen.
Stand out.
Yeah, where he could be seen. Exactly. And so I think those are some of Devin's, strongest points. And we see that a little bit in the AFR and the After the Final Rose, which we'll get to.
Okay, so let's breeze through the Devin's meeting with the family really quickly. other than James just being a fantastic brother, a fantastic like amateur therapist in a lot of ways, I thought he was extremely insightful. But outside of that, was there anything in particular that you thought was noteworthy you want to talk about with respect to Devin's meeting of the family?
No, I don't think with either of them there's anything like too specific. I think Jen's brother stole the show, as you are saying, in asking the right questions, in the way that he approached Jen, in the way that he was being the patriarch of the family, but in a way that wasn't domineering, in a way that was like, hey, I see these patterns you have. Let's look and see if you are continuing on these patterns or if there's a new opportunity here, an opportunity to do something different. So I think that in both the Devin and Marcus family meetings, that was mostly what stood out to me was her brother.
Yeah, what I really liked about the brother's approach here is, he was faced with a very difficult situation where he is not supportive of the process necessarily, and of the guys in particular. He has serious doubts. Now, these conversations oftentimes go one of two ways. Either you voice your doubts, the other person gets really defensive, and you just look kind of like a jerk, right? Or you just placate them and don't tell the truth, right? And then you just sort of like grit and bear it, like, oh yeah, he's great, right? Those are the two ways. It's really difficult to give constructive feedback, especially on national television, to somebody who doesn't really want to hear the constructive feedback, really doesn't want to, and manage to deliver it in such a way that comes across as empathic, but also very clear in where you stand and what your opinion is, without feeling as though that you are, sort of pushing your own agenda and your own opinions on this other person. And I thought James nailed it. Like, I don't know what his career is, but it wouldn't shock me if he's in some sort of communications field, because I thought he really nailed that. And that is a really hard line to walk. And I thought that was worth noting. If you're ever curious how to have tough conversations, and critique somebody without them getting defensive, watch back James's interactions here.
Yeah, no, I agree. He did it beautifully, really, and in a caring way.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So want to move on to Marcus's time with the family. So this is really where I think things get interesting, because I know what Marcus is doing here. I've said it for many episodes here. It's so apparent. It's so apparent even women should understand at this point.
I think we all. I think we do.
Look, and so this is what I want to talk about here. Okay, what has happened in the dating realm, right, is that there's become a perverse incentive structure with respect to male communication to females, especially when breakups are going to occur. And what has happened is that people will always do the least amount of work for the best relative outcome. Okay. And what we see oftentimes is that it does not matter what the situation is. In a breakup, the man is generally going to get blamed and he's going to get dragged. It doesn't really matter how good he was. It doesn't really matter how bad he was. He's going to take the brunt of it, mainly because guys just don't talk about stuff like this. It's like, oh, you broke up? Okay, cool. Women do talk about this stuff. And as a result, they drive the kind of the narrative around a breakup because they're the ones talking about the breakup. And as a result, men are always getting dragged regardless of whose like actual fault it is. And men know this, right? So there's already a negative incentive for men in any sort of dating breakup scenario. What you then layer on top of is that if the man does the breaking up, now he's going to get dragged hard. Because it doesn't matter how he does it. It doesn't matter how nice he was, how pleasant he was. In fact, in a lot of cases, it's worse if he was a good guy. Because now, like, he was a nice guy. He wasted my time. He, there was nothing wrong. He just had all these doubts. What's wrong with him? And now he's getting dragged even more for being nice and communicating and telling you, like, the reality is, if it's not the right match for both of you, it's not the right match. And he doesn't necessarily owe you an explanation, especially if he's being honest, saying it's not the right match and breaking up.
Right. Well, and one of the relationship podcasts that I listen to a lot, they famously talk about this and saying that oftentimes in these relationships, a woman will, essentially says, a guy's got two choices, either love me or cut my head off, because these more like, nice, ambiguous breakups are harder to understand. And when we have a villain, it's, again, easier for us to contend with. It's easier for us to displace our emotions. It's easier for us to move on. And so what we want it to be, not we want it, but like in our mind to categorize it that way is simpler. And it's much more complicated for us to contend with emotionally and intellectually when there's gray. And so I just want to support that.
Yeah. Okay. And so we're going to have a great example I'm going to bring us to here in a minute, right? On this show, which is going to illustrate exactly the issue here with this perverse incentive structure. So the issue that we have now is that men they know that women have made it such that men aren't going to break up with you. If you're a few dates in, they're going to ghost you. We had a friend of ours who went on a date with somebody, right? And the guy said, oh, you know what? We're not the right match. And she came back and started pestering. They got on one date, started pestering him about, well, why? Tell me why. What's the issue? And I said to her, and she was like, I don't understand why he didn't respond positively to that. I said, because he doesn't owe you an explanation. It was one date. Like, what did you expect you were going to get? He cannot like you for any reason. He's entitled, just like you're entitled to not like him for any reason.
Well, the funny thing about that is she didn't like him either.
She did not like him either.
But
yes.
Again, another dynamic that we see play out here between Jen and Devin. I'll get to that later. But she didn't like him either, and yet she was still feeling the sting of the lukewarm rejection. Yeah.
And what I said to her is, you are in the wrong. And she was like taken aback. She could not believe. And I said, what you've just done is create a negative incentive. When you and your girlfriends get together and say, this guy ghosted me. Well, the reason he ghosted you is because some girl just did that to him in the past. He doesn't owe you an explanation. You went on one date. You weren't the right match. He was nice enough to come to you and say, you know what? You're a nice girl. Don't think you're the right match. And what did you do? You pestered and badgered him. So next time, he's not going to send that text message or make that phone call. Next time, he's going to ghost a girl. So that's the thing with these incentive structures is, you have to remember that people are responding to the incentives around them. And that's what's happening in this dating world. And so how does that come back to Marcus here, right? So what is Marcus doing? He is doing the thing that most guys do. I've already said it. Breaking up with a girl is worse. It is worse to be a nice guy who breaks up with a girl and is open and honest, is worse than being an asshole and getting the girl to break up with you. Even though it wastes time, it creates a whole lot of tension, creates a whole lot of fights, right? That's what Marcus has been doing for weeks. And it's just amazing to me that Jen can't see it. And she's hanging on to him week after week after week. He has been wanting to go home and actively trying to get sent home for 3 weeks. And you said it, I think it was maybe last podcast or the podcast before that, where you said, this is them being unkind. They're being unkind to each other because they're both living this lie at the moment. And that is true. He has been trying actively to get himself sent home. And he doesn't want to self-eliminate for whatever reason, even though it's clear he's not going to propose. Okay, so now let's compare this to the very little we know about Devin. All right, Devin does all the things that he's supposed to do. They have whatever the falling out is after the fact. He does call her. He does break up with her over the phone. Okay, great. What happened in this episode? Marcus comes out. He gets his claps. He gets his cheers. He's able to tell his story, and he has a relatively warm and favorable edit. And Devin gets dragged. Hello, America and Canada. And UK, apparently. Marcus is the asshole here. And I love Marcus. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, objectively speaking, Marcus was far worse to Jen across any metric you want to use. He was the one who treated Jen like crap. He was the one who led her on. He's the one who wasted her time. He's the one who is dishonest for at least the last 3 weeks, right? But because he followed the perverse incentive structures set up by modern, dating, right? And the way women are responding to men in the dating realm with respect to breakups. He treated her like shit, and he gets away scot-free, looking good, not great, but looking good enough.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Devin did basically everything right. Even if we take Jen's side of the story at 100% accurate, Marcus was still a bigger. Jen. Like, that's the thing. Even if you take Jen's entire story 100% accurate,
Yeah.
Marcus was still worse to her, and he still got the better edit. So the point I'm making here, ladies, women, is think about how you're responding in these situations. Because remember, you might find the love of your life next, but you also might be dealing with the guy who just got out of a relationship where the previous girl, did what you're about to do, right? So our friend, that guy, I'm sure that guy is ghosting the next girl. And when that girl asks, why did I get ghosted? The response is because our friend pestered him when he didn't have an obligation to answer any questions. That's why. And that's the important thing here is think about what you're doing. What are you actually owed? And what is your own insecurities? And what incentives are you setting up here? Because the reality is, it is like I am so angry. I'm really honestly angry that what we saw here is a guy basically treat a girl like shit and come away looking great, and a guy treat a girl well, and he gets dragged. And that's not great for the current dating pool. And I feel sad for both guys and girls that are single and dating right now.
Okay. Well, we'll get to the Devin breakup in terms of like, did everything right? Because there are things to look at
relatively speaking. No one does everything
but
right.
I walked away from this last night and we haven't talked about the episode at all, with a similar feeling of like, actually, I think the way that Marcus handled this was worse, but he did it in a way where he got himself dumped. Although I still argue he self-eliminated. Jen didn't send him home, per se. I think he did self-eliminate, but he's telling everyone, America, Jen, her family, I don't love her.
He said to the family bluntly, don't love her. Probably not going to get there.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how much more do you need? Right. It was crazy. Yeah.
Right. And again, that's putting his own comfort ahead of what he knows this person wants and needs. And that's unfair. And it is.
And taking a spot that somebody else who was there for the right reasons could have taken.
Well, I mean, I think that's a poor argument because Jen wanted Marcus.
That's fair. Yeah.
And so I think that it was, again, a bit selfish on Marcus's end to stick around, knowing that he just wasn't willing to, close enough to a close enough point to give Jen what she was wanting and needing. And it was cowardly in a way, to again put his own comfort and his own ego perhaps ahead of her needs. I think that there's a really good possibility that this wasn't conscious on Marcus's part, that he wasn't, again, maniacally thinking, I'm just going to make myself as comfortable as possible and hang out here until Jen dumps me. While that might, I don't think he's like screaming in his mind, dump me. I think that I don't think that's as conscious. I think it's more like, I do care about this person. I don't want to hurt this person. And I think in his mind, he genuinely believed he was putting her before him. But
so I'm so happy you bring that up, because when we actually look at studies and whatnot, it is actually true that most incentive structures we respond to subconsciously. They've done a ton of studies of this, and it's really fascinating. When you have overt incentive structures, like sales or, like coupons and whatever, right? And then you have like these kind of more macro level incentive structures. The macro level structures that you kind of interact with on more of a subconscious level are far more powerful than the conscious ones, because what's happening on the macro kind of systemic incentive structures is, there are multiple things pushing you towards this one particular action, and they become sort of ingrained in you, where they become sort of normalized, right? The more overt kind of in your face call to action type of incentive structures actually force you to change what your natural action would be. And that change in natural action creates an additional friction point, which causes less effectiveness in the actual incentive structure. And so it's really important when setting up incentive structures, whether we're talking about through government policy or tax structures or whatever, it's or social, situations. It's really important for these to really be more macro systemic and something that you're going to interact with on a subconscious level. And that's where you get the greatest effectiveness when setting up these incentive structures, right? It's kind of like, the difference between changing, you have a far bigger impact on people's behavior by changing sales tax, which you pay a little bit every transaction, as opposed to changing income tax, which you pay at the end of the year, right? You're at the end of the day, these numbers could add up to the same amount of money saved or paid. But one of them is something that you just pay a little bit every time. It just suddenly becomes so rote and natural in your thought process. And the other one is one time a year, bam, good, done, move on with life type thing. And that's like the situation we have here.
No, it's interesting.
I love behavioral economics.
Okay, let's just move into, are we done with Marcus? I think we can move into the Devin of it all.
Yeah, I don't think there's much more to talk about. Unless you want to talk about I think his conversation with Jen on the couch was so stiff, so disinteresting, so scripted. It was painful to watch. The entire Marcus thing went on way too long.
I zoned out. I'll be so honest.
It was so long, and it was just repeating it was repeating itself in the episode, and it was also a repeat of basically the last 2 episodes. So we got effectively 40-ish minutes of just Marcus and Jen in some capacity going round and round, and it was like, didn't need any of this.
Yeah, I agree.
Any of it.
I agree.
Yeah. So I got nothing more to say on the Marcus topic.
No, I'm with you. I hope that he the thing that I did appreciate that I caught on my second watch of it was when Marcus was saying that in the military he's trained to make decisions based on logic, and so kind of factoring in his emotions is something that's like literally he's had to unlearn and is trying to relearn again. And so I thought that was a really important insight that he was able to share with us. And again, how vulnerable he must feel to be able to, or to feel like he needs to consider emotion again, because it's not something that, again, out in when your life is literally on the line, it's so unsafe. It's for you to take into account. So I can definitely empathize with why this is so hard for him. And it will be something that he has to spend some time like relearning.
Yeah. Yeah. I like Marcus. I hope he does some work on himself. He gets there. But the reality is he was not the match for Jen. I don't think Jen had a match. It was pretty clear that she's not ready. And I do wonder how much of Marcus was him being the nice guy that didn't want to sort of put her on blast and be like, well, she's not ready, so I'm out, versus how much of it's him not being ready. Because I said it last week. Her behavior at what was that? At the
Fantasy Suite?
No, the Men Tell All. Her behavior at the Men Tell All made her quite disqualifying for me. I wouldn't date her after what I saw at the Men Tell All. After what I saw this week, certainly wouldn't date her. And so, I wonder how much of that the guys actually saw throughout the season that we didn't necessarily see. And I do wonder, was Marcus really, that emotionally unavailable, or was he just seeing something that he's like, I've got 10 years on this girl, and we are light years away from each other in terms of maturity. And he just tries to, go through the motions, get himself eliminated, and he just keeps hanging on.
Yeah.
So after Jen and Marcus are done having their couch talk, we shoot away and we get the classic, the guys go buy the rings. There's only Devin left. So he goes and he picks what I thought was not a pretty ring. Your thoughts on this oval gold thing?
Wasn't something that...
Not your taste, not your style?
I would pick, yeah.
Yes, I was thinking like the whole time. And look, I thought it was nice. It seemed like he had a good reason for picking that ring. Maybe she loved it. I don't know. But it did not look like a pretty ring. Also, that Neil guy only brought like 5 rings with him. Like, talk about a limited selection. Do you think maybe like bring me a case or something? I mean, again, ABC, you got a big budget. Can you get a guy who's going to roll out at least like a suitcase filled with them, right? I've seen more rings in the back of a car in Manhattan than this guy brought to the ABC's season finale. I don't know. Call me crazy, but I think that expecting a little bit more diversity in the ring selection. But Devin again saying all the right things. It's nice little moment. While this is going on, we get another cutaway where Jen is talking to Jesse, and this is where it really comes back to getting real tough to watch again. I think we all know where it's going. This has been well foreshadowed. Jen and Jesse are talking, and we get the whole thing like, oh, yep, nope, Devin's my guy. Great. It's nice that you finally realize that. It seems like it took you a long time to come there. But then on top of that, she does what I was praying she wouldn't do. And that is, I'm not going to let him propose to me. I'm going to propose to him. And the crowd goes wild. And I thought that was wild because this is such an ill-advised move for so many reasons, and it really perpetuates a lie that I'll get into in a second. But up to this point, thoughts on any of this stuff going on?
I'm curious to see where you're going here. I think listen, this has been my view of Jen throughout the entire season. She has a narrative and she's going to stick to it and not just
die on that hill.
Not just Jen, just people. Like we all have a narrative and we will fit pieces of our experience into the narrative, even if it doesn't quite line up. We are committed to our narrative because it's comfortable, it makes sense to us, it's something that we can understand. And that's what's kind of gotten Jen into trouble this season, is because it's really hard for her to shift her narrative, even when confronted with pieces of information that directly conflict and dispute what her narrative is, aka her ex-boyfriend, coming on the show. And it's now no longer all of my past relationships are toxic. It's, this one person that's toxic. So all of that being said, the thing, again, my most empathic view of Jen is that she believes everything that she is saying. And she told Jesse that the reason that she is wanting to propose to Devin is because he has doubted her love and care for him and wants to propose to him in order for him to know that she is choosing him. That is the narrative she is presenting.
Yeah.
That is so dishonest.
It's also illogical. Like it doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't make sense. And it doesn't actually take into account the person that you're proposing to. This is, about you and what you want, and not necessarily considering Devin and what he wants and how meaningful it might be for him to propose to you, and what he might have envisioned this moment being like with you and for you and for himself. And so I think that it was the narrative that she presented was very assumptive. I don't think it was as empowering as she was. And as a result, I don't think it was as empowering as, she presented it to be. And I do think that she believed what she was saying. I think for her, it was more about her, again, feeling more in control, feeling like she wanted to be the hero of her story after feeling like such a victim in her life and in her story. And I wish that she would have just been more honest about that, because that is something that I can understand why you want to have the power. We talked about that. That was her promo. Jen's got the power.
And we were wondering where this was going to be going. And we were concerned about where it was going. And it literally went to the place that contradicts its own narration. Yeah.
So all of that to say, I think that this is something that brought Jen a lot of comfort. But I don't think that it was necessarily for Devin at all.
Yeah, I agree. So there's a couple things here. Okay, so this is something that modern feminism gets very wrong, and it's really tragic because it's sort of perpetuating this lie, right? So the person who does the proposing is not the empowered position. It's not having power, right? If we look at historically, how does courting process work, right? Historically speaking, men would court women. They would level up to be the best option for a woman. They would take care of themselves. They would get good jobs. They would get good educations. They would try to be the best provider. They would demonstrate that they would be the best husband, and that they would be the most secure and take the best care of them. And then the woman would pick the best, the alpha among the pack. It was a way men were forced to level up to get the girl. Why did the men want the girl? Well, back prior to really kind of second wave feminism, there was taboo around kind of promiscuity outside of marriage, and so the only way men would get to be intimate with a woman was to marry them, and this is how sort of society has been arranged for 100,000 years. And so what has happened here, right? And so the empowered position, the position of power, is to be the one that has been proposed to, because you have the suitors, you have the people courting you, and it is you get the decision-making power. You get to decide yes or no. You get to pick among them. And that's the great thing about The Bachelorette, is that from a historical context, The Bachelorette is the closest to traditional conservative values that you'll see in modern television, because it really is a reflection back to what we would see 100, 200 years ago and more, right? The problem is that, once promiscuity became much more, widespread outside of marriage, well, then men no longer needed to court women. And as a result, they no longer need to level up. Why do so many women complain about bums of men? Well, the reason is because they were leveling up to get a woman to marry them so that they could be intimate with a woman. They don't have to do that anymore, and so that's why so many men are bums now. And we can argue about whether aspects of this are good or bad, but that's just the reality of what's happened, right, over the last really 50 years. And so the situation you have now is that Jen has bought into this narrative that, the person who proposes is the one in the power position. And that's simply not true, right? And this is, and again, I don't want to bang too hard on feminism, but the sort of third wave feminism has built up this narrative that men and the patriarchy, they have all the power, and thus everything men do in any sort of interaction, they must be the one that always has the power. And thus, for women to be empowered, they must take the traditional role of the man and do it themselves. But that's simply not true, right? Men and women, they operate in harmony. Some things men have the power in, other things women have the power in. And during the courting process and the proposal process, the woman had all the power. The man didn't. And sort of feminism has brought this idea like, oh, no. Clearly, the man did the proposing. That must be the power position. And they never stop to think about how illogical that is. And the way I'll say it is, who has more power? You walking into your boss's office and asking for a raise, or the boss who can give you the raise, right? Mm-hmm. Clearly, your boss who can give you the raise has more power. Well, it's the same thing. In this case, the boss is the person who's saying yes or no to your proposal. And so, it's pretty clear if you step back and give it even 10 seconds worth of thought that by being the proposer, you are ceding your power. Yeah. Right? You are ceding your power to the person being proposed to. And that is what, I came back at the start of this episode. I said there are really a couple things in this episode that I feel really sad for people that are in the current dating market, specifically single females, because these narratives keep getting pushed on them. And it's so clearly and obviously incorrect and not going to serve their interests of getting them to, the point of marriage. Because between the Marcus Devin dynamic on how we're dating and how we're breaking up with people and what we're incentivizing people to, men to do in dating, and what we've incentivized, men to do with respect to proposals and leveling up, it's really demonstrating a real sad situation for people that are dating.
I do think that your perspective and the historical context around proposals are interesting, and you are correct. Just again, from a logical standpoint of the person who is asking the question has the least power. The person who is giving the answer has the most power. And again, if Jen were truly wanting to be in that power position, she, again, having a man literally get on his knees and say, "Will you spend your life with me?"
The man gets on the knee. He's bowing to you. Who do you bow to? Kings and queens. Mm-hmm. Like, what is that telling you in the dynamic of this situation? Mm-hmm. Right?
Right. Well,
that's where the phrase "I'm going to make her my queen" comes from, because you're literally bowing in front of her when asking for her hand in marriage. It's crazy to me that people haven't figured this out. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I'm very passionate about this.
No, I know. Well, I'm thinking about, and I don't know Devin's views. I don't know how traditional he is, or like conservative in his views, not politically. I don't mean.
Well, the fact that he still chose and he said, yeah, I see you flip the script, but I'm still getting down on my knee and proposing, I think said a lot. And I thought that was actually, I really liked that because it demonstrated to me like, no, he understands the importance of this moment.
Yeah.
And
do you,
go ahead.
So my concern in watching this, as well as knowing what we know, we know more than Devin at this point in terms of what's been going on. So, we hear essentially Devin's not the first choice. Devin was only getting this opportunity because Marcus self-eliminated and couldn't, get where he needed to go. Jen is not emphatic about him until there's no one remaining, or until she perceived that he was going to leave, and then she proposes to him. It's quite emasculating.
I agree. Yeah, and this is something we had said multiple times throughout the season is eventually, and actually in the revived chat, of several of the girls had said things like, Devin's going to watch this back eventually, and how is he going to feel?
Yeah. And so I think just the way that Jen has approached this the entire time as it relates to Devin has not had not really set him up for success in terms of like what coming off of the season would be. It seems like they didn't make it that far, right?
Well, even when you look at a lot of the conversations in this last 2 episodes, she is now driven hard into the narrative. It's been like 7-8 weeks, and she is really soaking up the I am the center of the world. And, we're seeing a lot of, this is my journey, and, I'm getting what I deserve. And you're getting a lot of these types of things. Like, I know what I need and what my expectations are now. That is not a relationship making, set of statements is what I would say. And I thought it was really apparent in this particular episode, but it's been building throughout the season. And I think a lot of it does, you've for 8-10 weeks, whatever it's been, you have literally been the center of the world and everything is revolved around you. And that can go to your head, especially for, a 20-something young female who's kind of like new to this scene. Like I can understand how somebody could get swept up into it and it can go to your head.
Right.
But guess what?
And how when you leave the show and it's no longer like that, how
it's
that
no
can be
longer
really
like
jarring.
That. Yep, exactly. When life hits and stuff like that. Yeah.
So let's then move to the breakup, to Jen in the hot seat, and then bringing Devin out.
Well, so let me just ask you, what do you think happened? Like you
between Jen and Devin.
Between Jen and Devin, what do you think happened? The show ends. They seem to be in love, and the show ends. And what do you think their arc was at that point?
Okay, so I'm taking what Jen says again as close to truth as I possibly can. As you pointed out, that's really all that we heard, and I'm having the most empathetic human view on trying to understand what she was telling us about what happened. So it sounds like they got engaged, they left Hawaii, and there was a shift in their relationship, that they had been on this high, that Devin did make all of these promises, that there were certain expectations around what their life would be like, what communication would be like. He had also set the bar for, how forthcoming he was about his emotions and all of that stuff. They had these special moments curated for them. And so anyway, so I think that there were some implied expectations based on their experience on the show, as well as what he had said to her in his, essentially like his vows in the proposal. And so they leave the show and things feel drastically and dramatically different. You had mentioned this earlier. They go back to real life. They go back to family and friends and jobs and phones and different pressures and different attention and all of that stuff. And so even those people that are doing it the absolute best, it's still going to feel like a dramatic drop in communication, attention, all of that stuff. And so I think that was probably a tough thing for them both to contend with. I think it sounds like Jen voiced her disappointment about this.
Yeah, because he's from Texas and she's from Boston. So they're not drivable, right?
No. I mean, and they can't be, remember, this is a secret. They can't be together. They only get, I think, 3 happy couple retreats between when this show ended 2 months ago and now. So all of it is essentially text, FaceTime, and then 3 trips and they only took 2, and they're long weekends where they have to like stay in an Airbnb. They can't even like go out and have dates. So like their entire framework for dating is gone. And it doesn't also mirror what real life would be. So they're in this weird limbo. Anyway, so I think that Devin, it's what I can also piece together is that Devin walked away from this all and thought like, holy shit, what just happened? What did I do? And that also caused him to maybe pull away. He was having doubts. I can also imagine, just based on, again, piecing together dialogue, inferring that they were getting into conflicts about him meeting her expectations, about decisions. And it seems like those conversations didn't really go very far. And we could see how that could happen just based on the way that Jen deals with conflict. So I'm going on and on. I don't know if this is what you were really wanting. But what I imagine is that Devin, similar to Marcus, started to pull away, to not want to avoid the conflict. And as he put it, he was regrettably late to being honest with her about what was going on. And again, from the most empathetic view, yeah, I can understand why you would be withholding of your feelings. This is a huge disappointment to your fiance. This is a huge disappointment to the franchise. This is a huge disappointment to the millions of people that watch this show. And so, yeah, I don't think you're racing to have this conversation. And he also was, I'll use the same word I used with Marcus, cowardly in, not having this conversation face to face, in limiting it to a phone call. But again, if I am to get inside the mind of Devin, I have to think he was feeling like he needed the easiest way out, because having a productive conversation about it was not going to be possible. So that's what I'm thinking.
So I agree with a good chunk of what you said. I think there's some really important pieces that are missing there, right? And so here's the thing that we know about Jen. She has a difficult time regulating her emotions. I think that's why they didn't put her on the couch last week, right?
With someone, you mean?
With somebody, yep. Because I as I said, I don't think it would have gone over well. We saw how she responded on the couch with Devin this week, which was an absolute disaster for her. So she's very insecure. And let me back up. I have dated Jen, okay? I have dated Jen. The insecure girl. Yeah, the insecure girl who needs a lot of affirmation, needs a lot of communication, and reads into things very quickly. And she's coming off the show. Suddenly she's not the center of attention. Suddenly, it's very easy when you're on a show and it's like, hey, guess what? You get to see this person for 1 hour from 3 to 4. Well, if I'm Devin, I don't have to justify where I am from, 4 until whenever, right? Because that there is somebody dictating time. The second that now it's free where I could call you whenever I want. Now suddenly it's, well, why didn't you? Now there's higher expectations. And sometimes you can't predict this ahead of time, right? Especially in a situation where they're on the show. My feeling is that Jen, just seeing how insecure she is, seeing how she has a difficult time regulating her emotions. We saw today how she was in attack mode on everything, and she was just attacking on things that were absurd. Why is following Maria on Instagram? Like, I don't have Instagram, so I don't know, but like, why is that a problem? I don't understand. Maybe it's a problem. People have been explain to me, I don't get it.
I think it was, again, Maria was like overshadowing the entire show in a sense.
Sure,
but this is the second time her name has been invoked as, I thought it was going to be Maria, whatever. Yeah, and so I think she probably confided in him and said something like, this was really hard, people showing up to date Maria, and then he follows Maria the minute they break up, and how she knew that is wild.
I mean, that's a problem too.
But anyway, but I think it's like, then it's like, oh gosh, were you just here for Maria the whole time?
Yeah. No, I get that, but that also speaks to what I'm saying is she's insecure, right? She can't regulate her emotions particularly well, and she will pick fights, and she will drag up any possible thing. She
twisted his words,
twist the words constantly, right? And so, like, I have dated this girl, right, many times, and it's exhausting. And you just don't want to do it.
I've been this girl early on in our relationship.
In our relationship, you were this girl, yeah. But you grew out of it pretty quickly. But
I was 23 when we started dating.
Yeah. And so that's what I'm saying is that's my guess. My guess is that this started to happen, and he realized very quickly, like, oh, this is a real big turnoff, and this is what the rest of my life is going to be like. I'm. When you and I started dating, right, you were a little bit like this, right? And in fairness, you had just come out of a relationship with a guy who was not particularly loyal. And so you had some trust issues. But like, I saw a lot in you, and I really liked you. And so I was willing to put in a little bit of work to see if we could get beyond that insecurity and beyond that lack of trust, right? But like, I'm a pretty secure dater, and I'm somebody who has seen good, marriages modeled. And so I kind of was like, I knew what I was getting into and I was willing to put in that work. Most people aren't going to be willing to put in that work. And Devin, probably, especially coming from his background, who hasn't had great relationships modeled for him, like he probably doesn't even know how to do that work. He hasn't had it modeled. So I could understand how somebody could be like, yeah, I don't even know how to handle this or what to do. I am out. Right. And it might not even been a conscious, like I'm out. It might've just been like, I'm going to call her up and she's just going to be like, where were you? Who were you talking to? Why were you at the club? What was this? Well, why didn't you call me 5 minutes sooner? And that nagging, it eats away at you. And you can just see, and I don't know Jen, but you can just see in her behavior, especially the last few weeks, you can see throughout the entire season of Insecurities, that she can be that girl. And if I had to guess, if I had to put money on what actually happened, what the truth is, right? I think that is probably what was getting, Devin to pull away. And of course she, to her, she did nothing wrong. And we only got her side of the story. They wouldn't let Devin get a word.
Well, and I think he also knew, it was very clear that he knew not to engage.
Yeah.
And it was easier to just like capitulate.
He learned from Sam M, right? He watched what Sam M did last week. Just stay.
And he also mellow. Redirected her and at one point said, like, this was not the reason I came here. The reason I came here. This is not the type of conversation I envisioned us having.
Did you catch when they were going to commercial and they'd already like cut away and stuff like that? And you could just hear them ever so slightly. Like, what is going on here? What's, and I really loved that they didn't edit that out. And it wasn't like super apparent, but because it was such a genuine, like, this is not what I was expecting I would be walking into.
Yeah. So I know we've been talking a lot about Jen and making speculations about Jen and what was going on for her and what it's like to date her, all of that stuff, which isn't very fair. I mean, and again, we're trying to fill in the gaps based on what we're seeing, but we cannot at all suggest that Devin is the hero of this story or Devin did things perfectly. Devin also is at fault for a lot here too. So let's talk about that. What Devin did do wrong, what Devin could have done better.
So what is the number one thing you think he could have done better?
I think that he could have been more upfront about how he was feeling sooner.
And do you believe that he, in the on the couch, he basically said, oh, even when I was on the show, I was feeling this way and I wasn't sharing it at that point. Do you believe that, or do you think that he's sort of recreating history to make the narrative a little bit smoother?
That he was feeling unsure?
Yeah.
He did share that. He did share he was feeling unsure, didn't he?
On the show? Not really. He said scared, but scared and unsure are not two different things. But yeah, sure. Okay.
So I don't know. I mean, he shared that with us. He shared it a little bit with Jen, but maybe it was more around like scared and unsure about her feelings for him, and he even said, I think James had asked Devin, essentially next week is proposal. How are you feeling about that? And he was saying like, I don't feel great about it because there's still another guy. So like, we did hear him say, like, we know that he wanted to be married. We know he wanted a family. He wanted that life. And I do believe that. And I do believe that he thought it could be with Jen, but I don't think that also means that he didn't have doubts and he wasn't feeling 100% certain about the prospect of it right now.
I think for me, Devin's big fault is he had to have known that he was not number one.
Yeah, I agree. He said it too.
Yeah, and you definitely saw moments where he had doubts about that, right? So I feel like for me, where Devin's big fault is not in the breakup. It's not in the communication between the show ending and the breakup. It's that he ever really let it get to the proposal because he wasn't number one, right? And I do think he knew that. And, I think he gets lost in the moment. I do think he's a genuine guy who feels hard and has big emotions. And for me, I think his big error is way earlier than what I think most people are going to say like, oh, it's that, that he called her, to break up with her, or that he wasn't communicative about it. Or if you believe Jen's entire story, that he lied from the very beginning. Like, it's like, I don't think any of that's true. I think his error is that he even got engaged.
Well, listen, I said this a couple of episodes ago. Devin and Jen are living a parallel process right now. The person that Marcus is for Jen is who Jen is for Devin. In feeling like you're constantly having to prove yourself and never feeling chosen, and feeling like you are continuing to put yourself out there, continuing to try to make it work, continuing to try to be so demonstrative with how you feel, so that you get chosen, so that you get something reciprocated. That is what Jen described she was doing with Marcus, and that is what we saw Devin do with Jen. Jen admittedly said, if not last episode, then certainly the episode before, she's not there with Devin, and she, doesn't know if she can be. And so and yet she was there with Marcus. And so I think, I just think that is a really interesting parallel here. And to your point, yeah, Devin, in the same way that Jen's saying, like, I know my worth now. I, know what I deserve. I think that had Devin had a better sense of his worth, what he deserved, when he was feeling like second choice, the safe option, just an option, he should have self-eliminated. At that point, because that's, again, setting up their relationship dynamic for such an unhealthy beginning, such a shaky foundation, especially when you're going to be long distance in a way that's like almost impossible.
See, I don't even necessarily think he needed to self-eliminate, but I think the perfect ending for this is for them to have not gotten engaged, and for him to say, I am really interested in being with you, and I would propose, but I'm not convinced that was actually number one, but I want to keep dating and type situation, and like leave in the we're together, but we're not getting engaged because we need more time. I think that would have been the perfect ending to this season.
Well, if that were a possibility, then Jen would have picked Marcus and they would have gone on to date. No,
I don't agree with that, because I don't think Marcus wants to date Jen.
Okay.
I genuinely do not think that Marcus wants to date Jen.
Okay.
I think Marcus, he's trying to get self-eliminated, and I think he's using.
It's not about the engagement. It's about Jen.
It's not about the engagement.
It's about the match, rather.
I think it's just not the right match for him, right? And I think it's a great match for Jen, right? He's mature, he's older, he's stable, right? He checks a lot of boxes. But I think if I'm Marcus, I got my own shit to deal with. I got a lot of work that I got to do on myself. And, Jen,
you want someone a little sturdier.
I need somebody who's a little bit sturdier. I need somebody that, I want to care for my partner. But there's a difference between caring for your partner and being, Jen is so insecure and needs so much affirmation.
There would be a codependency.
Exactly. And it's like he has work he's got to do in himself. And you can't care for yourself and be all things to another person. And I feel like that just, Jen needs to mature a little bit more, and Marcus needs to heal a little bit more before those two could realistically, be a viable couple together. Right.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's either or. I don't think if Marcus just heals a little bit, like things are good. Or if Jen just matures a little bit, things are good. I think they both independently need to mature and heal before they would be a viable couple. And I think Marcus knows that. And I think that's playing a big factor. So I don't think them leaving and continuing to date is even on the table. Because I think if that were the case, we would see him communicate that in some way. He's not even putting that on the table. Now, it's possible.
Right, that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, it's possible.
We've seen that happen in previous seasons.
Yeah. Now, it's possible that she's like, oh no, I'm only here for the engagement. If you're not, gonna give me a ring, get the heck out. But like, we haven't seen that from her. We've actually seen her capitulate a lot on her values, and seen her, kind of, I don't even know what the right phrase is, but like, not get exactly what she's asking for and willing to settle for less. Just keeping Marcus around is her settling for less than what she's already saving for. So just because she says, I'm here to get engaged, like, she's already demonstrated that she's willing to settle for less than that. So like, I just feel like if Marcus was actually interested in dating with her, he would have at least put it on the table.
Yeah.
Some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And he didn't.
Yeah. That's fair. And then I guess in that case, I just still don't see a world in which Jen picks Devin, like,
off
either.
the show.
or just to date,
Yeah,
I don't know that she liked him enough.
No, I don't think so.
To just not get engaged.
Yeah, the problem that Jen has for the problem is that she's actually a very attractive young woman. And when you are that attractive, you're going to have a ton of guys who are going to be hanging around looking to hang out with you and date you. A guy willing to date you is very different than a guy who's going to intentionally date for marriage and want to marry you.
Mm-hmm.
But for somebody like Jen, who's immature enough that she's so focused on the attention and the affirmation, is she going to pick a guy like Devin, or is she going to go and pick, somebody who looks like Jonathan, right? Because you can have a lot of Jonathans with six packs and freaking, calves and thighs that can split wood, right? So like, I just don't think Devin even makes it into the equation in most cases, because she's just pretty enough where she's going to have so many just 9s and 10s of guys physically that are just going to boost her ego.
Right, right. Okay, so it sounds like our mutual stance on what happened is we are not buying into the narrative that that Devin plotted and planned to win. We do think that there was some element of competition and gamesmanship. We do think that his feelings were genuine, and that his actions were authentic, and that when the reality of what life would be like, or what life was like post-show hit, that their relationship essentially couldn't survive because the circumstances had dramatically changed, and that Devin and Jen just weren't set up to communicate effectively through the conflict and through unmet expectations.
I think that's a good summary. And so the point I would add is what brought them together on the show was also ultimately their downfall. And that is their, as they put it, like broken homes or unconventional families where they hadn't seen good relationships and good communication modeled. And ultimately, what brought them together is what brings them down in the end, because they didn't have the foundation or the skills hadn't been developed to communicate properly. And they hadn't seen how you fight for something like a relationship.
Yeah, no, that's, I think, a really, really insightful point.
I got one every now and then, right, Max?
One thing I just want to hit on, and I know I said I wouldn't really talk much about the discourse that's happening outside of the show, but my reaction when watching Jen watch the proposal was, as you had indicated earlier, like, gosh, this is really cruel. The producer, a producer must have hated her.
Yeah.
That was tough. That was a
Did
tough
you notice
watch.
Devin was not even looking at the screen?
He couldn't watch.
Yeah. She was bawling her eyes out looking at it, and he was just looking at the floor.
Yeah. And so what I did hear, though, is that Jen, Jesse had said, can we watch this? Are you ready to watch this? Her response was, do I have a choice?
Do you know the format of the show?
Well, so what we did learn from an interview, I think that maybe it was Good Morning America, I'm not sure, but Jen knew what was going to happen, and she had wanted the proposal to be playing when Devin was on the couch so that he could see it. So he had to sort of face it. So she did have some control over it. It seems as far as that interview inferred, but she
it also indicates a certain amount of aggression,
vindictiveness.
I was gonna say, I didn't want to use the word vindictive. That felt like a little too aggressive a word, but vindictiveness is probably the right word. Yeah.
Yeah, she really, listen, she was very hurt. Her feelings were very hurt, and it's valid, right? Like, I don't want to invalidate her hurt. She felt betrayed. She felt embarrassed. And again, it's this person that she, per the narrative that we were given, wasn't that into, and still rejected her. It's like when you get fired from a job that you hated anyway, you can't fire me, I quit, like that kind of thing. And so it must have felt embarrassing, and just awful. Just a rejection is awful. Feeling like you're on top of the world, and then feeling as though you have the rug ripped out from under you. Your entire life dramatically changed from being the Bachelorette through that process to then no longer being the Bachelorette, and so I just, that the ending of this must have been really hard. The grief there is multi-layered. So I have a lot of empathy for her in that. I think her heartbreak was real. She was clearly hurt, and hurt people, right? Like she was trying to hurt Devin as much as she was feeling hurt. And that's, again, something that we do to try to contend with the pain that we have, is to dispel it, displace it on someone else. And so that's how I was viewing the way that she showed up in their dialogue, or not even really dialogue, but in their interaction. And it's, again, a place that I've been there. It's not a proud moment for me to think about kind of those breakup conversations that I've had. But I just, again, want to give empathy to Jen as well. The thing about this season, that as messy as it was and as disappointing as it was in so many ways so much more relatable than any other season I've ever watched, because Jen was fallible. She did make the wrong choices. She did, get stuck in her pattern, like in a way that was so much more honest than we've ever seen happen on the show. And in a way that, as I've said multiple times, I can relate to. So many of my clients, my friends can relate to. We've all been Jen. And so I think that it was the most honest look at dating today. And I appreciate Jen for that, for being vulnerable enough to be honest in that sense of navigating this. So I come away, like, again, with a lot of empathy and just appreciation for Jen. I'm not like Jen's number one fan by any means, but like I do appreciate her, like the bravery or vulnerability it was to just be navigate this honestly, which was pretty messy. It's hard to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all fair. I got nothing to add.
All right. That brings us to the end of this season.
Yeah, end of the season. Anything you want to touch on with respect to tonight's episode?
No, I think we hit it all and then some. Is there anything we're missing from your...
So the last thing that we leave off on is we do get a quick Joan introduction trailer. We get the very cute Kelsey introduces her father, Mark. I think the takeaway here was, I had heard somebody say that Joan was really awkward in that exchange and Mark was so smooth. And I agree with that. But I mean, I do think, like, Joan to me didn't look awkward. She looked unbelievably nervous. And so, but I did think it was I think bringing the Mark back, we all said during Joey's season, Kelsey's father was just like, seemed like an awesome guy. I'm happy to see him on Joan's season. He was super smooth. I thought it was a nice, good trailer to the season. And so I'm interested to look forward to it. But yes, Joan seemed pretty nervous in that first exchange. So hopefully give her a little bit of time to settle down. But yeah. I think it'll be an interesting season. Hopefully.
Yeah, I hope so.
And I'm happy you asked about my rose this week.
Love it. My thorn this week.
I hated to see that. So shall we move on to Rose and Thorn?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so we're going to do a episode Rose and Thorn, and then we're going to do a season Rose and Thorn. Go ahead and start us off with the episode Rose and Thorn.
I'm going to keep mine relatively surface level.
Okay.
So my episode Thorn was how long it was.
Yeah, it was brutal.
And it just felt like they were just dragging it
milking
out.
us.
Yeah.
Making us look like suckers.
And coupled with the contract dispute between DirecTV and ABC, which meant that it was far more complicated for us to watch this episode. I will give a rose to the bartender at the Fort Lauderdale airport who humored us and put the finale on begrudgingly for us to watch so that we could, stay in the game of what was happening.
We had the ABC streaming app. We had the DirecTV streaming service. And we were going to be flying from 8 to 11. So we could always watch it on the flight as well. So we had A, B, and C options. What ends up happening? Our flight gets delayed until 11 o'clock. So we no longer can watch it on the flight. DirecTV is in contract dispute, apparently, with Disney, which owns ABC. And thus, they stopped streaming the entire channel. ABC, not on DirecTV right now. And then apparently you aren't allowed to stream the ABC app. There's certain things that are blacked out via the ABC app. And apparently the season finale of The Bachelorette is one of those blacked out things that you're not allowed to stream live. So We literally went to the Fort Lauderdale airport and tipped the bartender heavy.
50%.
I gave him a 50% tip. Yeah, he was a great bar. He took care of us. But gave him a huge tip so he could put the Bachelorette on with subtitles.
No sound.
Yeah. We did end up watching it after the fact. Like we both watched it the next morning and whatnot. Once it was available on Hulu. But and actually the ABC app, you could watch it on demand after the fact. So we did get to finally watch it with sound, but that first run of it was all reading, which made it a little bit challenging.
It was hard. And then my second,
that's a good Rose though. He was a good guy.
Yeah, God, he was amazing. Also, fun fact: while we were watching The Bachelorette, he was saying that one of his buddies was a contestant on The Bachelorette.
Alex, the dentist, right?
No, he wasn't a dentist. They called him Mr. Colgate, I think.
Was his father a dentist or something? He had really shiny teeth and his father was a dentist. I thought that's what he said.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that was a fun fact. Yeah. My other rose is going to Jen's setting spray and waterproof mascara because they did their fucking job. Jen was a mess, sobbing mess, and her makeup remained impeccable and in place. And I would love to know what products were used because that was unbelievable. I mean, she was crying, snotting, rubbing her face, and her makeup remained in the same place the entire time. So, yeah.
Yeah, apparently that's impressive.
Very,
yeah,
very.
Yeah. So my rose is going to James. I thought he was the all-star of the episode. Jen's brother. I liked everything I saw out of him. I liked his honesty when Jesse panned to him. I liked it. There was nothing that I saw of James that I did not like and did not want to see more of. So big fan. This is going to probably come as a bit of a shock and a surprise. But I feel really strong. This might be like one of my rose and thorns that I feel the most strongly about. And I'm sad to say it, but my thorn is going to Jesse. I thought this was Jesse's worst and it wasn't even like his worst episode I've ever seen. This was not the Jesse Palmer that I have grown to love. So there's a couple things here. One, he was given a shit script, right? He was basically told, like, look, you're gonna trounce all over, these people. You're gonna pitch these types of narratives, and I get it. Your boss comes to you and says you're gonna do X, Y, and Z, and so you kind of have to do X, Y, and Z. But the problem was he was given, a script that was it was an unbelievable script, right? And he couldn't sell it, and it made him come across as stiff, not genuine, and
kind of condescending
at times. It made him seem a little bit like a shill, right? It was like the last thing he says. So Jen, tell Devin what you want him to learn from this. And it's like, what a bullshit question that is. And look, in some ways, I don't fault Jesse for having to do what his boss tells him to do. That's fine, but I do fault him for not telling his boss to go pound sand a little bit here, right? And look, I've been in that situation where my boss says, hey, you're going to go into this meeting and this is what you're going to say. And sometimes you do what he says and sometimes you say, no, you know what? I'm not saying that. I have literally been almost fired from jobs because I've told my boss, I'm not saying that. I don't believe it. I'm not doing it. I think that you're putting me in a position to do something that I don't feel good about ethically. And I just thought that what Jesse was put in a position to do this episode was in a lot of ways just like it made him look bad. It made him look inauthentic. It made me question his authenticity through this process. And that's what angers me because he's actually somebody that I've really like he feels genuine and authentic, right? And even though he's doing his job, quote unquote, he actually does feel like he's, like he cares and like he's not trying to sandbag anybody. And this was an episode where it felt like he was told, you are sandbagging some of these people and that's just what you're going to do. And you're going to pitch these narratives. When at the very end, when he started saying all these narrative pieces about, oh, Jen, you are this strong and powerful woman. It's like, no, she's not. We've seen no evidence of that. You don't believe even the way you're saying it, like you don't believe it. Like you don't believe it. I don't believe it. The audience doesn't believe it. Jen doesn't believe it. Devin, Marcus, no one believes this. Yeah. So don't lie to me like this. And the fact that he just sort of like,
Well, I think it's interesting. not that Jesse is a therapist by any means. He certainly tries to guide and facilitate more difficult conversations. But the thing that was hard to watch was him trying to tie this up in a bow. And
there was no tying this in a bow.
Well, and it's quite invalidating to Jen too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the reason I compare it to being a therapist is that like a lot of times, like after a client has like just it's been a tough session, or maybe a client is still, feeling very sad at the end of a session, like there is this urge to kind of tie it in a bow or find a silver lining. And we see that especially in new therapists, that urge to kind of just like make things better. And usually, again, that's in service to our own comfort and feeling like we're doing the right thing or doing a good job. Yes, of course, for the client too. But it can be so invalidating to do that, and so much more just real and meaningful to just acknowledge like this was shitty and this was a disappointment and you didn't get what you set out to get, and that is devastating. And I wish you well. Like it seems like you learned some things, but this was shitty and this was disappointing, and we're here with you and we're grieving with you. Like that would have been, I think, more believable than. But you did make this choice, and you did rah go you. I just don't think that was necessary, and I thought that detracted actually from what was going on, and actually felt like a little too
shilly.
Not shilly, but like infantilizing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So.
All right. So why don't we go on to season Rosenthorn?
What do you have?
I'll start with my thorn. For the season, it is the collection of dates. And we've been very critical of this. So, I love our segment, Good Date, Bad Date. Like, it's actually one of my favorite parts of doing this podcast is Good Date, Bad Date, because I love talking about, these types of things. And the problem was, by halfway through the season, we had done all the dates. Yeah. And like literally every date after that was just a repeat. The second half of the season, all we said was, go back and listen to 3 episodes ago. Go back and listen to 4 episodes ago. We were in a helicopter 4 times. Devin did the culture date 3 times. Mm-hmm. One contestant did the same date 3 times. Yeah. So it just was like, this is ABC. You have a massive budget. You're in beautiful locations. This is the 48th or 49th season of this franchise. You have tons to pull on. This season had no creativity. They weren't interesting and they were not diverse. What the heck, guys? That being said, Joan did say in her kind of talk with Jesse at the very end that there's a whole bunch of first time dates. So I am cautiously optimistic that in Joan's season, they're hearing the criticism of the lack of date diversity, and we're going to see with Joan's season a little bit more. Okay. I hope so, because I thought that was just such a constant through line for the entire season for me. Was like, we've already done this date. Why are we doing it again? Yeah. 4 times she was in a helicopter. 4 times.
What about your rose for the season?
This was harder because I was trying to think of a through line throughout the entire season, something that I really liked throughout the entire season. And what I found was that there weren't that many things. There was things that like, okay, for these 2 episodes I really liked, or maybe for the first half. But there really wasn't any one particular thing, except for Jesse. He was the one thing, minus this final episode, that I just enjoyed every episode. So I know it's weird that he's going to get a rose and a thorn for me in the same thing, but for the season, he was the one positive through line in every episode except for this final one.
9 out of 10.
9 out of 10, where I said, you know what? He could have gotten my rose 9 out of the 10 episodes, and he was the one constant for me. He was my Desmond Hume of this season.
We're currently in a Lost rewatch. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I love Jesse. I think he did a fantastic job. Mm-hmm.
So what about you?
Yeah, I think this is a little bit more complicated. I mean, I can say they went to some really beautiful locations. This was probably the best collection of locations they've ever gone to in a season.
And they went early as well.
They went early. I mean, they did Hawaii, New Zealand, Australia, like even the
poor city, Joey got stuck for like 3 weeks in Canada.
The city in the US that they were at was Seattle. Like it's a known city. Sometimes they go to like these very obscure places. So I think where they went was cool, and it was nice to experience places that I've never been to or seen before, as well as places that I'm familiar with. So I thought that was cool. I thought Jen's wardrobe was a high until her Hawaii wardrobe. I didn't really love that.
You had made a comment that really resonated with me.
She's a cold weather girl.
She's a cold weather girl. And then it's like, oh yeah, she's from Boston. And me being from Massachusetts and having lived in Boston for many years, it is really true. Like Boston girls are cold weather girls. Their winter wardrobe is significantly better than their summer wardrobe. You're not, it's just, again, Boston sucks. It's cold. It's miserable most of the time. It's not Seattle raining all the time, but it's not, Maine where it's freezing all the time, but like, it really is a cold weather town. And so it's not surprising after you sort of said that and realizing where she came from that, oh yeah, she's great in a skirt and boots and a little sweatery thing. But then once you get her into sort of a,
fur shawls.
Yeah. But once you get her into like some kind of summer weather, it really falls apart.
Yeah.
You don't go to Boston for fashion, summer fashion.
Yeah. Her more like summery wardrobe was a little juvenile for me.
Yeah.
And then I think my other rose is something that I was speaking about before, is just, I appreciate how kind of like realistic this felt to modern dating. I appreciate the messiness that we saw. I appreciate the opportunities that it gave us to talk about the nuance of dating. And I feel like we were able, because it was a messier season, we were able to have more rich conversations about dating and relationships than we were like in Joey's season, for example. And so I think Jen being a fallable bachelorette actually gave us an opportunity to talk about real life experiences in ways that we don't when the lead is perfect. And so like, I appreciate Jen for just being a human who's living life for the first time like all of us, and who's, doesn't always get it right. So that was a Grant callback for those who don't remember. Well placed. So I appreciate that a lot. I also really like Jen's guys. I thought her cast was good. It was a great cast. Yeah. Well cast. So I feel like she picked incorrectly, but it was a good cast. Yeah. But so anyway, I feel like I have a lot of highs from this season, and and that's why, like, while again I'm not a Jen fan, I'm not walking away like, beating the drum around, Jen is a hero. I do appreciate her very much. So I think that's important to note. In terms of thorns, like I don't really have many. Like, yeah, sometimes the episodes dragged on for too long, and was the Sam M stuff like so frustrating to watch? Yes. Like, was the Sam M stuff more because Sam M, the frustrating stuff was really the first half of the season, right? The Marcus was the second half. What was more frustrating, the Sam M or the Marcus? What was more frustrating and what was more entertaining? God. I think that's a really good question. I initially was going to say, I think that Sam M was more frustrating because it felt more obvious. Yeah. And more like performative. Like, whereas I genuinely believe Marcus was he was endearing. Like he was authentic. Like, I don't think that he was trying to play a particular part. I just think that that's the part that he fell into. So I feel like I'm able to have a lot more empathy for Marcus, where finding that for Sam was really tough. Yep. I generally agree with that. I actually I think the Marcus was more frustrating, but I think it's a little bit subject to recency bias, just because Marcus was a likable guy. Yeah. He was Sam isn't. Yeah. So you're hating on somebody that you already hate on. They're doing something that confirms your prior. It's not bringing you into internal conflict mentally. It's like, I don't like this person. They're doing things that I don't like. That makes sense in my mind. There's no internal turmoil or conflict about what I feel about this person. The thing about Marcus is that I like this guy. And he's doing something that I'm finding unbelievably aggravating. And that brings an extra level of internal conflict. And so I do think that Marcus was more frustrating for me to watch, not because just objectively what he was doing was worse. I agree with you that it was, what Sam M was doing was objectively worse, but it's that the difference between
my prior and how I view the person and the emotions that are getting elicited in me as a result of the behavior I'm witnessing, right? Right? It'd be like you're dating somebody with a history of cheating and they go and cheat. It sucks. It hurts, right? But like, it's like, I mean, they had a history. So like, it's confirming, something I already knew was a danger versus somebody who you would never imagine in a million years and they go and they cheat. And it's like, oh, that's going to hurt a lot more. They both did commit the same crime, right? But one is working against your prior and one is sort of, kind of working in line with your prior. And thus, one's going to hurt a lot more versus the other one. It's kind of the same thing how I feel about the Marcus and Sam M debate.
Yeah.
But on the entertaining, I mean, there's no question. There was nothing entertaining about Marcus. It was painful. It was not entertaining. Sam M was entertaining.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. So yeah, I mean, I think that's where I land in terms of my thorns of the season. Frustrating to watch Jen sort of make the same mistakes every week. Frustrated to see her carry this narrative on her back like it's such a burden. I really hope that she can turn the page. And I think one thing that we did talk about in our therapist group chat was like, this is so frustrating because it confirms Jen's narrative yet again. And it's going to make it that much harder for her to move on.
But it's also very possible that this was in part self-induced, right?
Well,
there's almost certainly some actions that led to this. That
all of our current circumstances are in some part self-induced. And that's what I was talking about last week. Like, Jen needs to look at the role she plays in this pattern. I'm not at all suggesting that this was all of her fault. I just want to be very clear. But we need to look at where the common denominator is, where the central pattern comes from.
And usually it's us.
And how she can, like, what does she do to contribute to these dynamics that just continue to circle around her? And that's what I hope that she gets to work on in therapy.
All right. Should we get out of here?
Yeah, let's do it. We will be back next week with a little intro to Joan's season and talking about all of Joan's men, the men of the Golden Bachelorette. So stay tuned for that. And if you want to check in with us between now and next time, follow us on social media at Reactivity TV. You can follow me at Amy Albero LCSW. Again, if you haven't done it yet this episode, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We are climbing our way slowly but surely to that 1,000 subscribers. So please help us get to our goal. We really appreciate you. We would love to hear your thoughts, your feedback on the season of Jen's season of The Bachelor, as well as our season of Reactivity TV. As we get into a new season with Joan, what do you want to see from us? What segments do you like? What do you want to hear more about? We want to hear from you. We love that you're here. We want to keep you here. And so yeah, keep us posted with what you want to know in the comments, or you can email us at reactivitytv@revivecfw.com. We will see you next week. Bye.
See you in the new season.